Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This channel is dedicated toward educational matters, primarily filling people in on little known theories of everything. People who've spent their whole lives working on uh, their magnum opus, uh, all-encompassing research, and nobody's really ever heard of them, or very few people, and they are mostly lost to history. But for whatever reason, I picked them up and figured out that they were really onto something, and trying to get that knowledge out there now, or that information out there, so that people can pick up the mantle and carry their uh, theories forward. Today is number 176, video number 176 on the reciprocal system of theory. And this is a theory that was first proposed by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. He worked on this up until his death in 1990. And several other researchers have been working on the theory since then, but it's still very, very small niche group there, not really putting out a lot of content, especially since the death of Bruce Perret back in 2020. We're looking at Larson's book from 1979 right now called Nothing But Motion, and we are in chapter 10 of this book called Atoms. And so the basic idea behind the reciprocal system is that we do not live in a universe of matter. We don't live in a universe of energy. We live in a universe of motion. And motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time have a generalized reciprocal relationship. Space and time basically are components of a fraction that makes up motion. So motion can be time over space or space over time. And then also they have their coordinate aspects, meaning that both space and time come in three or more dimensions, XYZ coordinates. And so you can have space over time to the second power, or time over space to the second power, or time to the second power over space to the third power, or whatever the permutations are. And all of those things are different scientific entities. For example, matter is time to the third power over space to the third power. Pressure is time over space to the fourth power. Magnetic flux is time over to the second power over space to the second power. Capacitance is space to the third power over time. All of these different physical entities are relationships between space and time. Space and time not only have their coordinate aspects, but they also have their clock aspects. The clock is always getting later and later. Time is always getting later and later and later. This is a scalar motion. It's a motion that has a magnitude. You can measure the pace of that, but you can't measure the direction. It has a magnitude, but it has no direction. You would envision that as taking a balloon with a magic marker, putting dots on the balloon, and then blowing up the balloon. All the dots are moving away from each other. And space has that same clock aspect in that way. Was observed by the Hubble telescope. Whether you want to claim fraud about that or not, according to that, telescope, all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. If that's true, it's the same kind of model that you would use for this balloon. Or you could use something like raisin bread. All of the raisins are moving away from each other as you cook it. not in any particular direction. And then space and time also have their discrete unit requirement. They Space and time are not continuous. They come only in chunks. There's a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. And exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. So that sets up the speed of light is really like the background or the origin of this universe. And we have two separate universes or sectors of the universe, as Larson calls them. The material sector, where everything is moving slower than the speed of light. But we also have the cosmic sector, where everything is moving faster than the speed of light. Those two sectors are inverses of one another. So exactly, even though we cannot really see the cosmic sector or know what's going on there, the fact that we can see the material sector and make measurements there means that all we have to do is reverse the roles of space and time to understand exactly what is going on in the cosmic sector, where everything's moving faster than the speed of light. And so Larson basically derived all of this through induction. He had understood certain things about how he could use specific discrete units to describe, among other things, the interatomic distance of atoms. And he took these specific findings and tried to figure out how to apply them generally. And it took him about 20 years or more to do that. By the 1950s, he was ready to state his two fundamental postulates, which are basically the universe is made out of motion. Motion is a relationship between space and time. Space and time have a generalized reciprocal relationship, and they all have their coordinate aspects, their clock aspects, and they come in discrete units. And then the other postulate is more general, that the universe follows the laws of mathematics, ordinary commutative mathematics, and it has Euclidean geometry. The magnitudes are absolute. And some people have come along and have disagreed with Larson about the geometry of the universe. Bruce Perret, in fact, claims that the geometry is actually projective, of which Euclidean is a small subset. So he's not really saying Larson is wrong, but saying that Larson was incomplete with his Euclidean geometry. But that's for another day. We're going to get into this chapter on atoms. So atoms are basically rotational combinations. So that's how he builds up his universe, is by basically combining motions. So there are really four kinds of motion. You've got your translational motion, you've got your vibrational motion, you've got your rotational motion, and you've got your rotational vibration. And these can come in 1, 2, 3 dimensions. And then you also have your photon, which is a simple harmonic motion, like a sine wave, which comes about, says Larson, as a result of combining a translational motion and a vibrational motion in the other, in a perpendicular dimension. Some of Larson's followers have said that actually the photon, the simple harmonic motion, comes from a birotation, two counter-rotating entities. When you put them into interference, that also creates a sine wave. So that is the alternate presentation of the photon. But once you have a photon, then you can have a second photon, and those two photons together, once you start rotating them, that's how you end up getting atoms. Okay, so we're going to take over here in this middle of this chapter, chapter 10. Some questions now arise as to the units in which the displacements should be expressed. As will quickly be seen when we start to identify the individual structures, the natural unit of displacement is not a convenient unit in application to the double rotating systems. The smallest change that can take place in these systems involves two natural units. As stated in Chapter 9, probability considerations dictate the distribution of the total displacement of a combination among the different dimensions of rotation. The possible rotating combinations therefore constitute a series, successive numbers of which differ by two of the natural one-dimensional units of displacement. Since we will not encounter single units in these atomic structures, it will simplify our calculations if we work with double units rather than the simple single natural units. We will therefore define the unit of electric displacement in the atomic structures as the equivalent of two natural one displacement units. On this basis, again, remember that the electrical displacement is one-dimensional and the magnetic displacement is two-dimensional. On this basis, the position of each element is in the series of combinations as determined by its net total equivalent electric displacement is its atomic number. For reasons that will be brought out later, half of the unit of atomic number has been taken as the unit of atomic weight. At the unit level, dimensional differences have no numerical effect. That is, 1 to the third power equals 1 to the second power equals 1. But where the rotation extends to greater displacement values, a two-dimensional displacement n is equivalent to n to the second power one-dimensional units. If we let n represent the number of units of electrical displacement, as defined above, the corresponding number of natural units is 2n. And the natural unit equivalent of a magnetic two-dimensional displacement n is 4n to the second power. Inasmuch as we have defined the electrical displacement as the electric displacement unit as two natural units, it then follows that a magnetic displacement n is equivalent to 2n to the second power electric displacement units. This means that the unit of magnetic displacement, the increment between successive values of the two-dimensional rotational displacement, is not a specific magnitude in terms of total displacement. Where the total displacement is the significant factor, as in the position in the series of elements, the magnetic displacement value must be converted to equivalent electric displacement units by means of the 2n to the second power relation. For some other purposes, however, the displacement value in terms of magnetic units does have significance in its own right, as we will see in the pages that follow. In order to qualify as an atom, a double rotating system, a rotational combination must have at least one effective magnetic displacement unit in each system. Or, expressing the same requirement in a different way, it must have at least one effective displacement unit in each of the magnetic dimensions of the combination structure. One positive magnetic displacement unit is required to neutralize the two single negative displacement units of the basic photons. That is, to bring the total scalar speed of the combination as a whole down to 0 on the natural basis. This one positive unit is not part of the effective rotation. Thus, where there is no rotation in the electric dimension, the smallest combination of motions that can qualify as an atom is 2, 1, 0. 2-1-0. Remember, that is the notation he's using. The first number is the primary magnetic rotation. The second number is the secondary magnetic rotation, and the third number is the electric rotation. 2-1-0. That is the lowest that can qualify as an atom. This combination can be identified as the element helium, atomic number 2. Helium is a member of a family of elements known as the inert gases, or the noble gases, a name that has been applied because of their reluctance to enter into chemical combinations. The structural feature that is responsible for this chemical behavior is the absence of any effective rotation in the electric dimension. The next element of this type has one additional unit of magnetic displacement. Since the probability factors operate to keep the eccentricity at a minimum, the resulting combination is 2-2-0 rather than 3-1-0. The succeeding increments of displacement similarly go alternately to the principal and subordinate rotations. Helium 2-1-0 already has one effective displacement unit in each magnetic dimension, and the increase to 2-2-0 involves a second unit in one dimension. As previously indicated, the electric equivalent of n magnetic units is 2n squared. Unlike the addition of another electric unit, the addition of a magnetic unit is not a simple process of going from 1 to 2. In the case of the electric displacement, there is first a single unit, then another single unit for a total of 2, another bringing the total to 3, and so on. But 2 times 1 to the second power equals 2, and 2 times 2 to the second power equals 8. In order to increase the total electric equivalent of the magnetic displacement from 2 to 8, it would be necessary to add the equivalent of 6 units of electric displacement, and there is no such thing as a magnetic equivalent of 6 electric units. The same situation arises in the subsequent additions, and the increase in magnetic displacement must therefore take place in full 2n squared equivalents. Thus, the succession of inert gas elements is not 2, 10, 16, 26, 36, 50, 64, as it would be if 2 times the quantity n plus 1 to the second power replaces 2n to the second power, in the same manner that n plus 1 replaces n in the electric series, but 2, 10, 18, 36, 54, 86, 118. For reasons which will be developed later, element 118 is unstable and disintegrates if formed. The preceding 6 members of this series constitute the inert gas family of elements, or the noble gases: 2, 10, 18, 36, 54, and 86. So those are the series then. 210 is helium, 220 is neon, 320 is argon, and then 330 is krypton. And then 430 is xenon, I think. And then 440 is radon, I think, is what it's called, 86. The number of mathematically possible combinations of rotations is greatly increased when electric displacement is added to these magnetic combinations. Okay, so you got these noble gases. The thing that the noble gases all have in common is they have a 0 as the third number, the electric displacement. And so you have this 210, 18, 36, 54, 86, 118 sequence. So all of the numbers that fill in the gaps between those numbers do so because they have non-zero numbers as their third number, as the electric rotation. And that can be either positive or negative. So the number of mathematically possible combinations of rotations is greatly increased when electric displacement is added to these magnetic combinations. But the combinations that can actually exist as elements are limited by probability considerations. The magnetic displacement is numerically less than the equivalent electric displacement and is more probable for this reason. Its status as the essential basic rotation also gives it precedence over the electric rotation. Any increment of displacement consequently adds to the magnetic rotation if possible, rather than to the rotation in the electric dimension. This means that the role of electric displacement is confined to filling in the intervals between inert gas elements. Okay, we're going to leave it there. We'll take over tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.